Hi, my name is Christian Mendoza, and in this video we're going to go over how to create a LDT in the Diamant. First, let's go over the steps. First, you want to switch the configurations to Diamant, which is circled in red and labeled as step number 1 on the top right picture. Next, you want to open the DXF file of the part you want to work on, which is circled in red and labeled as step number 2 on the top right hand picture. Next, you want to figure out which is the top, bottom, or right or left side of the part in order to make sure you're creating the LDT in the correct location. Fourth, you're going to create your X or Y reference lines, which is circled in red and labeled as step number 4 on the bottom right hand picture. And finally, you're going to create your LDT, which is circled in red and labeled as step number 5 on the bottom right hand picture. I'm going to go over 2 examples. I'm going to create a bayonet hole and I'm going to create a chicken head notch. So let's go over the first example. We are going to be creating these bayonet holes. So let's go down the list. First, we're going to configure it to the correct machine. So we're going to configuration, Diamant. Next, we want to open the correct DXF profile. Working with 5263. Next, you want to figure out which is the top and which is the bottom of the part. For that, we open the fab ticket in CAD and go to model space, and we see that this is orientated the same way as CAMplus. So here we can see that this is the top and this is the bottom. Therefore, in CAMplus we could tell that this is the top and that this is the bottom of the piece. Now for the next step, we're going to create our X and Y reference lines. So if we look at our fab ticket, we see that we have 2 holes. The way that this is created in machining is that each one is separate machining. So we're going to create the first one, which is 1/2 inch from the top of the part. So we're back in CAMplus, click machine, X reference. This is going to be an absolute machine. So we'll go position reference and we say 1/2 inch. And there you go. So for this machine, 1 reference line works. And then finally, we're going to create our LDT. We're going to click on hole. This is a 1/4 inch hole, so 1/4 inch diameter hole. Next, we're going to choose our tool. So M250. And now, when tying it, we're going to tie it to the X reference line to make sure that X position is correct. And then we're going to change our view to the front. And in here, what we're going to do is we're going to tie it to the middle of this bayonet raceway, because we know the hole has to be in the middle. And there you go. You see, now the hole is in the correct location. So we're going to go next. And for our start and end release, we're going to put our standard numbers. 0.06 minus 0.4, and our release is going to be 0.5. Now you see that right now the machine would hit the part before it starts drilling. So we have to go back and change our H. Now the thickness of this wall is 1/4 inch. So for our H, I'll put 1/4. And there you go. It moved up. Now the machine won't crash into the part. So we're going to click next, finish, and we're done with this bayonet hole. Now let's go over the second example, which will be a chicken head notch. We'll be creating the chicken head notch for this fab ticket. So let's go through the steps. First, let's configure it to the correct machining, Diamant. Now let's open our DXF profile. Our part is 121. Now we have it open. The next step is to figure out where's the top and where's the bottom, since this is the vertical. So we go to CAD, we go to model space. Now this is the orientation that's in CAMplus. So you can see it's the exact same one. So with that being said, we know that the top is on this side and the bottom is over here. So we go back to CAMplus. We know that this is the top and that this is the bottom. So we'll be creating our machining over here. Now that we know this is the bottom, let's move on to the next step, which is to create X and Y reference lines. So if we look at our part, we see that we're going to have two different heights, one for 7/16 for this notch, and then one for 2 3/16 for this big notch and this big notch. So we need to create two X reference lines for those two different heights. So we go back to CAMplus, you go to machining, X reference, and once again, the X reference line is down here. The starting point is 0. You want the reference line to be 7/16 from the top. So we're going to say max minus 7/16. And there you go. That's the first reference line. Now our second will be max minus 2 3/16. There you go. And then finally, our limit line, which is max plus 1/8. Okay. Now for our Y reference lines, we see that the first notch is 7/16 of this foot. The pointer here, so we're going to say Y reference. We're going to tie it to that starting point. So we're going to change the orientation of the Y reference line by going to axis. Now we're going to put 7/16 into position in order to get our first reference line. And then we're going to click next. We're going to click end, and that's the first reference line. Now for the second Y reference line, we'll look at the fab. We have the builder reference line for this side of the notch. So we have 7/16 plus 3/8, which is 13/16. So we go to Y reference, and then we tie it to the same spot as the other one. So I'm going to click on end, and now we have our second Y reference line complete. Now we go back to the CAD file. So we see that we have the 2 inches and 5/8. That's the next Y reference line. So we're going to click on Y reference, and we're going to tie it to the same starting point as the other ones. And on position, we're going to put 2 5/8. And then we're going to click on end. And now we have the third reference line complete. The next reference line is 2 5/8 plus 5/8, which is 3 1/4. Now we're going to go to Y reference. Starting point is the same as the other ones. And then our position, we're going to put 3 1/4. Click on end. And there you go. We have all the X and Y reference lines complete in order to build this LDT. So now that we have all of our X and Y reference lines complete, we can start creating our machining. The first notch that we're going to do is this front one right here, with a height of 2 3/16 and a width of 5/8. So we're going to use a rectangle for this. Now, we need to make sure the machine is coming from the correct side, which it is. Now the height of the notch is 2 inches and 3/16, but we're going to add 1/8 into it. So it's going to be 2 5/16, which is 2.3125 inches. Our width is 5/8, but we're going to add a small tolerance into it. So we're going to make it 0.644 inches. And the radius of our corners is going to be 1/8. So now that's all complete, we're going to go next. Now here we're going to choose the art tool. We're going to use the M250. And now we're going to choose which reference lines for that machining to use in order to make sure the location of it is correct. So we're going to choose this X reference line, which is the 2 3/16 line. And then the Y reference line, we're going to choose this line because it has that small tolerance built into it. Now the machining moved to the intersection of those two lines. Now we're going to look at it from the front, and we see that this machining needs to land between this reference line and this reference line. So we need to change our H. And there you go. Now remember, we built a small tolerance into it. That's why on this side, the machining is going past the reference line. That's why it was important to choose this reference line instead of this one, to have this small tolerance going towards this way instead of having it go into this leg. Now we're going to look at it to the side, and we see that we need this notch to be in between these two reference lines. So we're going to move the X, and there you go, you see the notch moved in between these two reference lines. So now we know it's correct. So we move on to the next window. Now for the start and then release, we're going to put our typical numbers. 0.6 of an inch, negative 0.4, and the release, 1/2 an inch. And that notch is complete. But if we look at our fab ticket, in CAD, we see that this notch cuts all the way to the bottom. So we need to make sure that this little leg is also notched. So we go back to CAMplus. We need to make sure we notch these two little legs right here. So what we're going to do is we go to machining and do copy machining. We're going to put mirror machining, uncheck preserve offsets. We're going to put select face, and we're going to select the bottom face. And there you go. Now you copy this machining this side. So you're going to notch this one, and you're going to notch the legs. So the first notch is complete. So now that we completed that notch, let's move on to the next one. So we need to do these two notches back here. And the way that we're going to do these two notches is with the blade. So let's go back to CAMplus. So we're going to go to blade machining, so we're going to click on blade. First, we're going to set the height that the blade is going to cut. Let's go back to the fab ticket. And we see that the height of this notch is 7/16. So our height is 7/16. And we're going to change our reference vertex to 2. And our orientation is going to be 270 degrees. And you're going to see this change. So our width of our notch is 1, and our height is 7/16. Now we're going to choose the correct tool. So we're going to choose 250. And now we're going to link it to the correct reference lines. For the X reference line, we're going to choose the one that's 7/16. And for the Y reference lines, we're going to choose the one that's 13/16. And your X has to be 0. And there you go. Our notch is now in the correct position. So we're going to go to the next window, and then we're going to click Finish, and that notch is complete. Now we're going to do the second notch, which has a height of 2 3/16. So we're going to go to Blade, and our height is going to be 2 3/16. Our reference vertex is going to be 2, and our orientation is going to be 270 again. So we're going to click Next, and we're going to choose the same tool as the first notch. And now we're going to link it to the X reference line for 2 3/16. So as you can see, the notch is not in its correct position, so we need to move it up. So we need to move the H. Now, as you can see, it's the width of the blade. So if we go on to the next window, we see that this is the width of the blade. So let's go back. And now in H, we're going to insert the width of the blade, or we're going to see the notch move. And you see, now it's moved to the correct position. If we look at it from the side, we see that the notch lands between the two reference lines, so it's correct. So we're going to go next. We're going to click on Finish, and we have completed this entire chicken head notch now. And that's how you create a LDT in the Diamant. Thank you for joining me. Goodbye.